All right, so let's take a look at building a control rig for our robot. Let's go ahead and open up our robot scene that we're just in. I just went to my files and recents to access this. And this is going to be the one we set up to have our hierarchies. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to use some controls. We're going to use some constraints to place those controls, and then we're going to delete those constraints so we can reconstrain those controls to the object. So let's first get started by placing our controls on our character. Then we'll get into giving them functionality. What do we use as a control? Well, what we use as a control is we use NURBS curves. If you come up here to create, there is a section here called NURBS primitives and a section here called curve tools, which gives us access to the curves we need. NURBS stands for non-rational B-spline, and it's an older method of modeling that uses mathematical curves to create lofted surfaces across curved data. It's still used nowadays in certain manufacturing settings, but in film and games, polygons are largely the way we've gone. Now, what we're interested in this menu is something here called a circle. A circle is a NURBS curve in the shape of a circle, and it's one of the most basic shapes we'll be using. We're going to start with this, but I'll give you a curve library later on when we get into a more advanced character setup. If I go and create this circle here, you'll see we have a NURBS curve. Now, why is this significant? Like I mentioned, they don't render. So if I just add in something like a sky dome light here, and I do a quick Arnold render here, you'll see that curve does not exist. This is the reason why they're used. That way, when we have them hooked up to a character, we don't need to worry about deleting them or hiding them before we get to our render. So with that said, we're ready to start placing these around our character. We're going to want to place these on the joints that are going to move. So anything that needs to be controlled, which in the case of this character is going to be my various joints here. We're also going to have one for the body, and then we're going to have one for the head. So we're going to have one that controls our body group here, one that controls our head group. Then what's standard to have on rigs is generally some sort of a global placement control that allows you to place it in the scene, that controls everything. That way you can get it initialized. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm actually going to duplicate this NURBS curve, Control D. That way we can have several of these. And we'll go ahead and start from the center and work our way out. So the first one here I'm going to do is going to be called the head. So we'll call that the head. And I'm actually going to rotate this 90 degrees upwards. That way it doesn't intersect with the arm. And to get it to be in the exact location of the head here, I'm going to select the head, shift select the curve. So I'm selecting the head first, the curve second, come up here to constrain parent, and I'm going to uncheck maintain offset and have translate and rotate in place and hit apply. And what that's going to do is it's going to make that curve snap to the head location. Now you might notice I have a little bit of an issue there where it rotated into place. That's okay. I could have froze transforms beforehand, but there we go. Now I might want to scale it so I can see this a bit better. You want to make sure that your controls are easy to select. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the parent constraint in my outliner and delete it. Remember, if you're not seeing it like mine is, you need to hit that little plus icon at the front, and that will go ahead and expand that out so you can hit delete. That will get rid of the NURBS curve, and it will get it placed exactly where that needs to go. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees sideways though, so it's in place. And then once you have your curves in place, it's good to do a modify freeze transforms just to make sure they're locked and ready to go. Now from here, I'm going to control duplicate the head and create one called body. And I'm just going to scale that up to be a little bit bigger. That way we can tell there's a difference between the two when selecting. And I'll do a freeze transform. Since the body and the head have the same pivot, I don't need to worry about that. While we're at it, it's not a bad practice to add something like underscore CTRL to the end of these so that we know their controls in the data. So I'll just make that underscore CTRL. And as a matter of fact, for this one, I might go ahead and just make this underscore CTRL. So when we duplicate it, it's already there. Okay, so let's go ahead and move out to the shoulders. I'm going to go ahead and Control D to duplicate. I can look at this. This is going to be my left shoulder. So I could go ahead and make this my left shoulder underscore CTRL. And then hit enter. And I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees now, since all of these are going to be going 90. And as a matter of fact, I'll freeze transform on that. And I might go ahead and just delete the other one for now and duplicate this one so it's already ready to go. And we can get that in place. So I'm going to select that shoulder, control click the left shoulder, hit apply, and we can delete the parent constraint. That way it's in place there. From here, you can scale this down to be the right size for that. You don't want it to be too large. So about 0.5, 0.5. Yeah, that's good. And we can freeze transforms. And if I wanted to, I could just continue using this one as the base and get rid of this one since it's scaled down. All right. So I think I'll do that at this point. We'll control D to duplicate, and we can just move that over so we can see that a little bit more. And I'm going to duplicate it once more so that way we have one we can just keep going back to. All right, so the next joint I'm going to select is my elbow. I'm going to shift select the elbow. So elbow first, shift select the control and apply with that maintain offset on. Then go ahead and delete, and this will be our left elbow. To make naming this easier, I might do an underscore on the left and right. I'll come back to the left shoulder control and do the same. Okay, so that way we have our left elbow. Moving to the wrist is going to be a little bit trickier just because of the nature of things, but let's go ahead and take this one here. We can select the wrist, select this joint, and hit apply. For the wrist, I think what I want to do is rotate this. So I'm going to delete that there and rotate it 90 degrees. And then we can freeze transforms, and we could just make this our left underscore wrist underscore CTRL. Then I'm just going to duplicate the elbow again, Control D, come up here to the top finger, shift select that, and apply. And with this one, we'll delete that constraint, and we'll just shrink this down a bit so it's not quite as big. And we can go ahead and name this whatever we named this. Let's left top finger joint 1. We might want to be more specific here, but we'll make this our left top finger, and we'll use G and T for joint 01 CTRL. That's wordy. Okay, I'm going to freeze transforms on that, and then we're just going to repeat this. So I'm going to Control D. We can select the next joint, select our finger, Control, parent those with that constraint. Oops, made a mistake there. Got to make sure you select the control or the geometry first, then the control. I did it in the opposite and moved it. And we'll just delete that. And we'll make this our left finger joint 02 CTRL. And that's actually all we need for the finger. So you'll see how we have more geometry than we have controls. That's because it's about functionality. That tip doesn't move, that shaft doesn't move. So we're good. I'm going to duplicate this down. We'll go ahead and just shift select again, Geo to control. We'll go ahead and delete that. And this is going to be the left bottom finger joint 01. And then we can Control D, and we can do the same thing. Apply, delete the constraint, and make that left bottom finger joint 02 control. Okay, and that's going to give us the joints for one half of the body for the left side. I'm going to go ahead and save. So File, Save Scene As. I'll save this as Rig 03. And now we're ready to mirror these over. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to get your control set up for the left or the right side of your body, doesn't matter which, as well as get the center controls for the head and body in place. And then what I want you to do is try mirroring them on your own. I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint here. Remember how we mirrored over our geometry. You can use the same trick here. So go ahead and pause and try that out. And then when you come back, we'll go ahead and do it together. Okay, so coming back to it, let's go ahead and mirror these together. I can select the various controls for the arm that I wanted. I can go ahead and Control G to group them, Control D to duplicate it, and then I can come over here to Scale X and set that to -1 and hit Enter. And now you'll see our controls have been mirrored over perfectly into place. From here, I can do a select hierarchy on the group. I can do a modify, search, and replace names. And we can search and replace left with right. And it's already set up for me, so I'll hit apply. Search for left. I better capitalize it. So we're going to search for left, and we're going to replace it with right, and hit apply. There we go. Capitalization matters. All right, so from there, I can select all these and Shift-P to unparent them, delete the group, come into these ones here, Shift-P to unparent them, delete the group, and that will get the controls in place for that side. Now, while we're at it, you might want to select everything here, do a delete all by type history, but more importantly, do a modify freeze transforms. That way, these are all frozen. The last thing I need to do is create my global control. So I'm going to create NURBS primitives and circle here. And this one here, I'm going to make a bit bigger. We'll make this one called robot placement control. You could also name it global, but that is going to be the placement control where we place this into the scene. So let's go ahead and delete the history on that just to clear this out. We don't really need to freeze transforms there, but that's going to give us our base setup for our rig. Now, none of these controls do anything. We're going to make them do something next, but that's going to be the first step to our rig, is getting our various controls in place and getting them named. So save again if you haven't. And as a final challenge, if you have not done so already, mirror over your controls to the other side and go ahead and add in that placement control at the base of the rig. We may need a couple more controls. I may have forgotten some. It happens. You add them as you go. But this should get us a good start and get us ready to dive into the rigging process and give you this functionality. So let's go ahead and make these controls do something next. Okay, so now that we have our controls placed, what we're essentially going to do is we're going to take the constraint and we're going to parent it to the respective thing it is supposed to control. So for example, the head control here is going to control the head geometry. So I'm going to select the head control first, shift select the head geometry, come in here to constrain and select parent. Now, something to note is we currently have maintain offset off. This shouldn't affect anything because we used maintain offset off to get the controls in the exact location as the object. But as a safety precaution, you might want to turn it back on and then hit apply. Now you'll see that the head control controls the head. Likewise, we can do the same to the body. So we can take the body control first and control select the group here and hit apply. And now the body control will control the body. Notice, however, the head is not being controlled by the body. We need to get that to be controlled using a hierarchy. So we're going to place that underneath. How we do that is we take the head control. We're going to add a group to it by hitting Control G. And we're going to make this group called the head control offset. So head CTRL offset. And you'll notice it jumped in location. We want it to be at the center here. Fortunately for this one, we can center it, but we can parent this underneath the body control by simply middle mouse dragging that head control offset under the body. Now, this offset group is just to add flexibility later on. It's not actually something we end up selecting, but you can see how that now works. Now, we're probably going to want each of the other controls to have an offset as well, so be mindful of that. But let's go ahead and get this to control the shoulder. We're going to select this object here, shift select the shoulder here, and do our parent constraint. And you'll see now that that control controls the whole arm. We can then do the same for the elbow. We can take the elbow, shift control the wrist, and hit apply. So that way the elbow controls the upper arm. But notice we end up with this broken setup here again, where this does not control the elbow. And that's because what's happening is the constraints are breaking that hierarchy, so we have to rebuild it. So we're going to come back to our shoulder. We're going to Control G to give that a offset group, do a modify center pivot, and we'll just go ahead and copy the left shoulder control here, paste it, and make it left shoulder offset. And then we'll come to the elbow and do the same. We'll go ahead and Control G, modify center pivot, and we'll just go ahead and make this left elbow underscore offset. And then we're going to parent that offset group under the shoulder control. So what we end up with is a hierarchy that looks a bit like this. So now that will control that next one in line. But as you might have guessed, the body isn't controlling it either. So we'll have to take the left shoulder offset and parent that under the body. Now, since it's going to be your group to your curve, you can select the group in the outliner. You can shift select the parent control and press P. So remember, it's child parent P, but you want to make sure you're getting that offset group. Now, like I mentioned, these offset groups, they're not really going to make much sense right now, but later on they will have a purpose. So I'm just having us practice this so that it makes sense when we get into more advanced rigging later. From here, there's really not a whole lot of magic to it. It's just repetition. So we can go ahead and come through here and we can take the wrist control to the wrist, apply our parent constraint. Then we could take the finger, apply. We could take this finger, apply, do the same for the bottom, finger, apply. And notice I'm applying it to the joints, right? Then from there, we can add in our offset groups. So with this left wrist, I'll hit Control G, modify center pivot. Just go ahead and double click the left wrist here. Can't talk. Make that offset group. So we'll just make it offset. Make sure this is spelled correctly. You'll see I made it VTRL. I want CTRL. Then we can move up to the finger. Control G, modify center pivot. We can double click here, paste, name this offset. We can come to the next one here, Control G, modify center pivot, double click that name, Control, make that offset, and then do the same for the bottom, Control G, modify center pivot, take that name, double click, CTRL, offset, and then we're going to take that last one here, Control G, modify center pivot, double click that name, go ahead and make that offset. And there we go. Now we just have to rebuild our hierarchy. So I'm going to do it just like I did with my geometry. I'm going to take this finger here, shift select the control, P to parent. Take this group here of that control, shift select the wrist control, P to parent. Come up to the top finger here, select that top group, shift select the group back here, P to parent. Come to this one's group, shift select the control, P to parent. So now we should have a nice hierarchy here where these are nice and stacked, and we should have functionality to our fingers using the controls instead of the geometry here, like so. It's always good to check. Now the wrist, we can take the left wrist here, we can shift select the elbow, control, P to parent, and now we have our first rigged arm. So you'll see now, instead of having to grab the geometry, I can just very easily grab these controls here, and that's going to be what's in charge. Just like with geometry, I can also zero these out. So let's zero this out. Okay, so that is going to be the key to rigging. And so far we have the body set up, we have the head to set up, or we have the head set up. Not to be, we have it set up. And then we have the left arm. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to get to this point. Feel free to follow along with the first part of this lecture. And then I want you to try doing the other arm on your own. So go ahead and try and do that one on your own. And then when you come back, we'll go ahead and go through the process together. All right, so let's go ahead and get that arm set up. What we're going to do here is we're going to do it in an iterative system. One of the quickest things we can do is we could set up our offset groups first if we wanted to, or we could set up the constraints first, doesn't really matter. Let's start with the constraints. I'm going to select the control, shift select the shoulder, and I'm going to hit apply over here on my constraint. Now I want to show you guys a really useful hotkey, which is G. I don't know if we've talked about G this far in the course, but G is going to be repeat last tool used. So what we can do is we can select our joint, shift select our geometry, and instead of going up here and hitting apply, we could actually just hit G, and you'll see that will do the apply and apply our constraint. So now I can just shift select G, shift select G. I should probably say click shift select G, and you can see how quickly we can go through this just using that G hotkey. So once again, I'm just hitting that G button, to repeat that command. All right. Now from here, we can go ahead and come into our shoulder and we can Control G to group. We can modify center pivot. I don't have a hotkey for that. There might be one, but I don't know it. And we can go ahead and just name that offset. And then we can repeat this process with the elbow. Control G, modify center pivot. Go ahead and double click that name there, paste it, and put offset. We can come into the wrist here. Control G, double click its name, copy, paste, name it offset. Come into the top finger here, Control G, modify center pivot. Make sure I did that on the wrist. I did not modify center pivot on the wrist. I'm going to want to make sure I do that. Don't skip sets there. Very important to keep all the steps. And we'll go ahead and name that offset. Then we'll come into our next one, Control G, modify center pivot. Double click that name, paste it, name that offset. Repeat down here, Control G, modify center pivot, double click, paste, offset, and then the final one here, Control G, double click, paste, offset. And we're ready to start bringing these back together. So I'm going to select this top group here, shift select the curve, P to parent. We'll take this top group, shift select the curve, P to parent. Select this top group, shift select the curve, P to parent. Select this top group, shift select the curve, P to parent. Then we'll go to the wrist, top curve, or top group, shift select the curve, P to parent. Go to the elbow, top group, shift select the shoulder, P to parent. And then lastly, with the right shoulder here, we can come into the body. I'm going to control click here in the outliner and P to parent. And you'll see now we have that recreated here where we have the head control, we have the shoulder, we have the right shoulder. Okay, so that will get us our basic setup. So let's go ahead and save scene as. Save out a new iteration just in case I accidentally did any nonsense in here. Let's close those out. And let's just do a quick pose test to make sure we didn't mess anything up. I'm just going to rotate each of these to make sure that the hierarchies function correctly and make sure I can pose it the way I intend to pose it. That's also important. So that works really well. Let's go ahead and give him a nice I've achieved it pose. I'm alive. Okay, so we could just check and make sure that each of these is working. And so far, so good. And you can see now we're able to control our character. We can make it do all sorts of interesting things since he only has little ball joints. I guess we could make his hand go like that. And sure, why not? Let's go ahead and rotate him and lift him into air. Victory. So there you have it. We have our character's basic rig set up. Now you might notice we have some loose ends, so we're going to have to get those tied in together. Let's select hierarchy here. Let's go ahead and zero these out. And let's talk about those final loose ends. The placement control here, generally what this is going to deal with is placing this inside of the scene. So this one's kind of interesting. We can go ahead and just take the body control and place it underneath that. And the idea behind this is we can move this into the scene and we can scale this up and down to place it. You'll notice we have a slight issue there with the scale. So we're going to get that fixed next, but this will get our base set up for our rig ready to go. Okay, so we'll talk about that next, kind of wrapping up the final sections of our little rig here. But as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to finish getting the control rig set up so that the controls can control their respective geometry and so that the hierarchy is reconstructed with the controls so it functions correctly. Okay, so just a reminder, basically what we've done is we've recreated the geometry hierarchy here with the controls that we have added in. So give that a shot and we'll go ahead and take a look at the next section where we can tie this all together. So we discovered a little bit of an issue here, which is these don't quite scale correctly together. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and solve that. Now we're going to do this by using a custom attribute. which is going to give us a global control to scale everything up. Before we do that, though, we need to do some organization to our hierarchy over here in the outliner. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top body section here. I'm going to put this in a group by hitting Control G, and I'm going to name this robot underscore geo for geometry. And I'm going to take this robot placement control and I'm going to put it in a group by hitting Control G and naming this robot CTRLS controls. Then I'm going to put both of these in a master group, Control G, and call this robot underscore rig. So what we're getting here is some levels of organization. We have the controls in one section. We have the geometry in another. Make sure you name that right. I named it grow. It should be geo. Make sure you're typing things out the way they should. So there's a couple things we're going to want to do, but the first thing is we're going to want to make it so these can scale together. So when I grab this placement geo, we're not getting this weird result. Now, what we generally do is we go ahead and take the scale X, Y, and Z from the control, and we do a lock and hide on them. So if you remember our lock cameras from the previous section, that made it so they couldn't move, and we've used that a couple times. If you select lock and hide, that makes it so they can't be controlled. So we're going to do lock and hide here, and you notice that disables our scale. The reason we want that to happen is we want to drive this with a custom attribute. So we're going to come up here to edit and add attribute, like we did with the ball rig, to add in a new attribute. For this one, we're going to call this global scale, and we're going to make it a float value, and we're going to set its default value to 1, and we're not going to give it a minimum or maximum. So what we're doing here is creating a placeholder for scale, and we're going to click add. So now the idea is as we slide this, this is going to scale up the controls, and it's going to scale up the geometry. Let's set that back to 1. Now, you might be thinking, hey, we could probably use the set driven key to make this happen. And you would be correct, but the issue is that if we did that, we'd have to specify to what scale it can be scaled up. And you want to make this kind of able to be scaled up and down infinitely. You're going to be spending a lot of time doing set keys, right? So what we're going to do instead is we're going to do something called a direct connection. When you do a direct connection, what it does is it pipes the value of one attribute into another. So we're going to use the global scale to drive the scale of both the controls and both the robot geometry. And this is where these groups over here in the rig come in handy. We can use these as the target, because you'll see if I scale up that geometry, it scales the geometry. And if I use the controls here, it scales the controls. We can find this editor under Windows, General Editors, and Connection Editor. So go ahead and click that. And this is going to look a little bit wild, but this is the Connection Editor. Now, on the side here, the left side, we have our outputs. This is the information we're outputting. And on this side, we have our inputs. So on the output, we're going to want to have our custom attribute. So I'm going to select my base here, my placement control, and I'm going to click reload left. And a nice little hint is any custom attributes will be all the way at the bottom. So if you drag this little arrow here down to the bottom, you'll see global scale. From here, I can select something like the robot controls here, so the robot CTRLS group, and I can click reload right to place this onto the right side. What I'm going to be looking for here is scale. A hint of what to look for is that it is going to be grayed out, but it will have a plus sign next to it. This is the same concept as what we dealt with the hypershade of a singular output going to multiple inputs. So it's going to be grayed out because we can't access the multiple output with a single input. But the trick is if you hit the plus, you'll be able to access the individual outputs. And that's what we want to do. So if we scroll down here till we find scale, it is somewhat alphabetical. You'll see scale right here. I can then click the plus icon and you'll see access to scale X, Y, and Z. To hook this up, all I have to do is click on scale X, Y, and Z, and it's going to make that direct connection with it being highlighted. And that is all we have to do. So it's a lot easier, a lot simpler than the other techniques we've looked at, and you can see it's hooked up. Now, in addition to that, you'll see if I have my control selected, what I was affecting, these turned yellow. Yellow is going to indicate there is a direct connection to that attribute, which means it can't be keyframed, but that's okay because notice we've put this on a group that's not selectable. It's going to be separate from the controls. and it's going to make it so that global controls that. So what you'll see here is if I go to the global and I middle mouse drag to scale this, it's going to make the controls bigger or smaller. Now we still have the issue where the geometry doesn't come with it, but what we can do is select our robot geo here, and then we can come over to our reload right, reload that. Notice it's already scrolled down to scale. We can expand out scale and hook up our XYZ. And what's going to happen now is that's going to scale both groups simultaneously. So while I drag global scale, you'll see that we are scaling everything up uniformly. So now we can use this to place our robot in the scene, and we can use the global scale to make it larger or smaller. All right, so that is going to get our global scale hooked up. The last thing we need to do is just a little bit of cleanup to get this so it's a little bit easier for animators to animate, but that is going to give our rig its functionality. So that is a very base level rig. It's going to give us everything we need to animate this, and hopefully gives you more insight into how rigging can be used to create some pretty complex tools for animators. As a challenge, what I want you to do is go ahead and get your global scale control working. So on your placement control, create a custom attribute for your global scale, then using the connection editor, hook it up so that it controls the respective groups of your controls and your geometry so that it can scale everything together. All right, so go ahead and give that a shot, and let's go ahead and do our final stretch cleaning this rig up next. So the process of cleaning up a rig is really just limiting its functionality so that it's easier for an animator to animate. It doesn't really need to be done in any particular order, like constructing a rig, and we can do it in chunks. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first aspect of it, which is locking things down using layers. Now, if you've set up your hierarchy like this, it's going to make your life a little bit easier. We're going to start by locking down the geometry. One of the worst things animators can experience is when they're trying to select a control, and half the time they're getting geometry. They accidentally don't realize, and they move geometry and they set a keyframe and they break the whole thing. So we don't want to make the geometry selectable, but we still do want to make it selectable in case changes need to be made. So the best way to do that is with a display layer. We can select the robot geo group here, and we can come over to our display layer here, and we can create a new display layer with the geometry applied. So I'm going to create a layer here. We can double click to name this. We can make this robot geo or geometry. Hit save. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set it to be a reference. So we're going to set that to be R. That way it can't be selected. So if you go ahead and do that, you can see we can only click on the curves. You just made your animator's life so much easier. And one of the really nice things they can do is they can marquee select around this whole rig, and then they can press S key on the controls without worrying about breaking anything. The other cool thing is visibility here can be toggled to turn this on and off. Now, another thing that could be nice is to do this for the controls. So if we come here to robot CTRLS, we can create a layer here and double click and just name that robot controls and save. Now this one you don't want to set to a reference, but you can see the visibility can be turned off. So if they're doing a play blast, they can disable those to see the animation. Likewise, something you can do is if you right click, you can do select objects, and that can select all the objects if you need to. But notice it is selecting the rig, so we may want to select the controls individually for that. This is kind of a lazy approach. How we could do that is I could delete that layer and instead highlight the controls in the viewport, then create the layer, and we can make that called robot controls and save. And now if I do the select objects by right clicking on it, it's not going to select any of the other stuff. Okay, so those are nice. We don't really need anything else, but if you wanted to, you could add a rig one here. So you'll see the robot rig there. We could go ahead and just create a layer with the whole rig, name this robot underscore rig underscore layer, and save. And now if they needed to toggle the visibility on that, they can. So that's going to be the first thing, is setting up display layers there to make it so you can toggle visibility and also select quickly, and more importantly, make it so you can't select things in case of the geo. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is take the first step in cleaning up our rig and go ahead and get those layers set up. So let's go ahead and save. Make sure you save after you do things and give that a shot, get those set up, and then we're going to take a look at the next step in cleaning up our rig next. All right, so we got our layers set up. Another really nice thing we can do for animators is do some color coordination. So what that means is basically differentiating the right from the left, but also differentiating controls that may share a space. For example, the head control here shares a space with the body. And at first glance, the animator may not realize these are separate controls, so giving them separate colors can help. I'm going to start from the hierarchy up, and we can start with the base here. I don't really care too much for the base color, so I might just leave it alone. Nothing wrong with having whatever color you want there. But we can come into the next control here for the body, and what we're going to do is navigate over here to our attribute editor. And in the attribute editor, you're going to want to find the attribute for the shape. So you can see this is my body control shape. And we're going to come down here to something called drawing overrides, which is going to be located in object display. So we'll have to expand out object display. Then inside of here, you're going to want to locate drawing overrides and expand that out. And in here, we can click enable overrides. That's going to allow us to utilize the color down here. And we can use this slider to indicate different color indexes. Now, you can figure out whatever color indexes you want to use. I generally like to use something like yellow for middle controls. So you can see that's going to change that to yellow. I can then come to the next one here. You'll notice it's in the same spot. I can enable control overrides, and I can set this to be a different color. Maybe I'll set this to be something like orange, so it stands out from yellow, but still has a similar theme. I don't really want to use brown. Where's a nice orange color here? Ah, there is no orange in the index. I usually have a different tool I use for this, so maybe I'll pair this with something like light blue instead, and we'll call that good, but there we go. So you can see those are distinctly different controls. Now, another really nice thing to do is to differentiate the left side controls from the right side controls. So what I usually do is I do blue for left and red for right just because it starts with an R. I know, pretty lame. I also like to use a different blue than the start blue just because it's hard to see. So what I usually do is use this more vibrant blue, and I'll just go through and I'll repeat this on each of the left side arms. Notice I switched so the character is facing the same direction as me. That way I can tell which side is left, which side is right. It makes it so I have to think less. And the less I have to think, the better, because you have to do this 8 hours a day when you're doing it professionally. So you want to do it quickly if possible. So you'll see that we'll get our color coding set up, and we'll do the final side here and just set that to be a nice bright red. And this will make it a lot easier for the animator to see. Now, I did a bit of a no-no there. You'll see I actually made it green on accident. I encourage you to avoid common selection colors like green and white. It's a good idea to avoid those because you don't want the animator to think they have something selected and they don't. If you really hate your animator, then by all means, go for it. They'll probably tell you to change the colors, send it back to you with an angry face. But just be mindful that you want to avoid the natural selection colors where possible inside of Maya, and that's mainly going to be green and white. There are some circumstances where purple is a selection color, dealing with things like constraints and expressions, but usually it's safe. So something like that works. I might take this base one here and just make it yellow. Now, hopefully this won't mess everything up for me. And there we go. And now we have our rig color coded. So we have our layers, we have our color coding. Let's go ahead and save. And next, what we're going to do is we're going to explore restricting information. But before we do that, as a challenge, what I want you to do is go in and try color coding your controls. Try going in there to the attribute editor, getting into the object display, drawing overrides, enabling it, and then using the index color to set up the colors. You don't have to use the same colors as me, but remember, you want to keep this in mind for the animator. You want to make it distinctly clear what controls are what in terms of this is a control in this area, this is another control like we have in the body, and then you want to differentiate left from right when it comes to limbs. So give that a shot, and then we'll get to the next section, which is going to be restricting some of the information that controls have. So one of the things that is really nice to do for animators is to restrict the information that controls have so they know what they can and can't do with a control. For example, with the head control here, the head control is designed to rotate the head. It's not designed to scale, and it's not designed to translate. That is the body's job. Now, we could use this as a way to translate if we wanted this object to be able to fall apart, but I imagine this object kind of being stuck together, which also brings up an interesting point, which is a lot of the arm controls have translates, but they probably don't need them. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to be able to hand this to an animator, and the animator clearly understand the rules that they're playing by. To do this, what we're going to do is we're going to come into the control that we want to restrict information on. For example, this head control. I know I don't want it to translate, so I'm just going to click and drag on the translates here. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to use that lock and hide selected to make it so it can't translate. So we'll lock and hide, and you'll see that this can't move, but it can rotate. So we can rotate this. Now, we also don't want it to be able to scale, and we also don't want visibility to happen. So we can highlight these, right click, lock and hide selected. So now the animator only has the ability to rotate this, and they can clearly tell how that's going to go. So we can repeat this process in other areas. With the body here, this is going to move, this is going to rotate. It is not going to scale, and it's not going to have visibility. So we can highlight scale and visibility, lock and hide. And you can do this on a case-by-case basis. So we can come to the shoulder here. The shoulder is going to be able to rotate. It's not going to translate. It's not going to scale. So we can highlight the translates, lock and hide, and we can come in here to scale and visibility and lock and hide. Now, this goes for the rest of these controls too. So let me show you a trick. You can actually do multiple if you just highlight the final controls we want. So I'm just going to get the arm controls there. We can go up to the translates, lock and hide. We can go to the scale and visibility, lock and hide. And now you'll see each of these controls have those hidden. Now, just as a precaution, don't do that on the base here. But let's say you did on accident. You hid those translates. Ouch. How can we get them back? Well, in the off chance you do end up doing that, you can come in here to the various menus above the channel box. We're going to go in and go to Edit. We can come in here to our channel control. And the channel control is going to show you everything you have access to. So what you're going to do if you want to recover what you lost is you're going to scroll down till you find it. And you'll see there's a lot in here. We're looking for translates. You're going to shift click to add those, and then you can click the move arrow in the direction you want to move them to. So you can see they're currently in non-keyable hidden. We're going to move those out here to keyable. Now you notice they're also still locked, so you'll need to highlight those and unlock. So if you accidentally lock and hide those, that's how you can get them back. Edit, channel control, and you can move those back and forth. So with the base control here, the placement control, this is the only one where we're actually going to want to be able to move, rotate, and scale. But remember, scale is being controlled by global. Also, visibility we want to have on this one usually. Interestingly enough, this visibility isn't affecting the entire rig, so we might want to make it affect the rig. The reason why is it's only affecting the controls down from it. It's not affecting the geometry. So what we could do is do a quick direct connection to get that set up. So we could go to our Windows General Editor, Connection Editor, and we can come into the robot placement control, find the visibility. Once again, it's alphabetical. There it is. Come into the robot geometry here, reload right, find its visibility, and now that will control both. So now the control will toggle the visibility of both the rig and the character. Okay, so that is going to be setting some restrictions in place there, making it so that we can't move them in ways we're not supposed to. So let's save that. File, save scene as, save as a new iteration, just in case we accidentally messed anything up, and we'll find out later. And that is going to be the final stretch of cleanup for this rig. So at this point, we can actually consider this rig complete. This is the final rig. I don't believe there's anything else we need to do. So we could also do a file save scene as, and we can move out of the rigging setup. We can make this our robot rig, and we could just make this version 01. And if we need to make changes later, we can make version 02. But this way we'll know it's the final. If you want to add final to it, you can make it robot underscore final underscore rig version 01. But there we go. Now we're ready to hit the ground animating, which is awesome. So as a challenge, if you have not done so yet, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and restrict the information in your rig. Also, go ahead and make it so that the global control, the placement control, has the ability to toggle the visibility of the entire rig on and off, not just the controls. So go ahead and give that a shot. And once that's done, we'll do a quick rig for our prop, and then we'll be ready to start animating.